I'm a DIY blogger. I'm actually a graphic designer turned DIY blogger and a maker of all sorts of things. I share really easy to follow tutorials on my blog. I also design fabric and have a collection of fabric and woven labels available, among other things. And I just moved from Los Angeles to the mountains of North Carolina. So this is my first class in my new studio space. So I'm excited to be here with you guys today. I'm also partnering today with Fiskars, which is one of my favorite brands to use for sewing projects among all the other amazing tools that they make. And we have some team members from Fiskars here in the chat. So if you guys have any questions while we're working today, whether about the tools or the project, they'll be popping in and out of the chat to answer questions. And then I'll also be here to help you answer questions as well. So today you may have already seen, I'm gonna reach over here and show you guys. We are going to be making these really fun fabric baskets or fabric organizational bins, storage bins, whatever you want to call them. They're totally multifunctional and they're a great project if you're brand new to sewing. I get questions all the time since I sew almost all my clothes now. I want to start into sewing, but I don't know where to start. Projects that aren't going on your body or don't need to be like so perfect are such a great place to start because they're very forgiving, and I'm going to go over all the steps so you can successfully make these little bins. But before we get started in sewing and going on all that stuff, I want to let you guys know that today Fiskars is giving away tons of product. We're going to give away 20 kits of some of their favorite sewing tools. So if you want to enter to win, all you have to do is ask a question or comment in the chat. We're going to give away 10 boxes halfway through the class and then 10 more at the end. So it's a great way to get your hands on some of the awesome tools I'm going to be using today and stock up your sewing space. So let's go ahead and get started. And one of the things I want to show you guys is that these little bins, it's just like all you have to do is sew straight lines. So if you're a little intimidated by sewing, cutting fabric, all that stuff, again, I cannot stress enough that they're just so easy to make because all you have to do is be able to sew a straight line. And these little bins, you can make them in, I have them organized as like a small, medium, large, but you can make them as small or as big as you want. And I'll move these over here so you guys can see. They have so many uses. They work great as a little cute little like cozy for your plants, a little planter. My toddler daughter puts her socks in them and toys and blocks. You can use them for storing like tools, sewing things. The possibilities are really endless, which is what I love about this project. And you can also customize it. And I'll go at the very end, I'll talk about how you can really personalize this project and make it your own with just a few basic supplies. So I'm gonna move these out of the way and we're gonna go ahead and get started. And I have a whole collection of them that I've made. So everything that I'm using to make this project today was found at my local Michaels store, but you can also find it on michaels.com. And it's just basic sewing supplies. And in case you didn't know, Michaels now has an expanded sewing selection and fabric materials at local stores. So they are adding more Fiskars tools, even fabric. And I'm going to show you guys some of the ones that I got that I'm using today. So they have all these really fun pre-cut fabrics that are what are considered a quarter of a yard or an 18 by 21. It's if they took a big bolt of fabric, cut off 1 yard, and then cut it in quarters. They have these little small pieces, is what you see right here on my work table. And they're great for working on projects just like this. They're super affordable and they have tons of colors. So I'm going to be using some bright, fun spring colors here, and then also some cotton canvas. So to make this project, if you guys are sewing along with me or taking some notes to make them later this afternoon, what you're going to need first is 2 fabrics of your choice. And you can use just cotton, which is just woven cotton fabric, which is what I purchased at Michaels here, this coral color, also this gingham and the rainbow print. Or you can use a cotton canvas, which I also got at Michaels. They came in, I believe, a 2 or 3 yard pre-cut, and that's going to be the fabric that you see here. And I really love this fabric because it's going to be a little bit heavier. It's almost the weight of 2 or 3 layers of the printed cottons, and it works great for these bags. If you are using a type of cotton canvas or like what is considered upholstery or home decor fabric that has a little bit more weight, or it's just like a little bit heavier, you're only going to need a little bit of interfacing. So after you pick your fabrics, you can use, and I'll show you guys over here, this one was used with 2 quilting fabrics. And then these, obviously, I used cotton canvas on the outside and then the cotton fabric on the inside. So you want to grab your fabrics of your choice. And you could also, the third option, which I don't show here, is you could use cotton canvas on both sides. If you are using any type of quilting cotton or a thinner cotton, that's what I mean by when I say quilting cotton, you want to have your fusible interfacing. And this I found at Michael's. It comes in a little pack. And I think it was like a 1 yard piece. And fusible just means it has adhesive on one side. So if you feel it, you actually feel like these little tiny bumps on it. And that is just glue that will help stick it to the fabric. So you're going to need a little bit of this. If you are using the quilting cotton or the pattern cotton, the thinner cotton, you're going to add this to both sides, the inside of the bag and the outside. If you're using one fabric that's a little heavier, you don't have to use it. But don't worry, I'll go over all that when we actually make the bag. Then you're going to need some thread that matches your project. And because you're not really showing any of the seams, you could get away with using whatever color thread is in your sewing machine. It's totally going to be fine. While I'm sewing, I'm going to use dark blue just so you guys can see the stitches a little bit better. Then some other tools that are super helpful that I'm going to go over are, I'll go over here, rotary cutters and an acrylic ruler. So I know I got a lot of questions on Instagram about rotary cutters, and people were a little intimidated by them. And I know when I first started sewing, I totally skipped using a rotary cutter because I just assumed that it was for people that quilted, like it was only used for quilting. And I was like, well, I'm not quilting now, so I don't know why I would use that. And just went with scissors, which is totally fine. You can totally make this project and a ton of sewing projects without a rotary cutter. But if you give a rotary cutter a try, I promise you're going to want to just keep using it. And now it's the only way I cut out fabric patterns or cut out my pattern pieces when I'm sewing garments, all sorts of projects, and everything we make today, we're also going to use a rotary cutter. You'll see when you go into Michael's, there's a lot of different rotary cutters, and they all look kind of the same, but they're all a little bit different. The good news is that whichever one you have or whatever, it's totally personal preference. So I have these two. They use the exact same size blade, as you can see here. But this is kind of the more standard, simpler one. And then Fiskars has some really nice ones that are more ergonomic, that just have like rubbery pieces that make it some like a little comfort grip, that if you're cutting a ton of stuff, I prefer using one of these because it just makes it more comfortable to use. One thing that's fun, and I always get questions when I teach workshops, is I am left-handed. So a lot of the things that I do, I'm using my left hand. And what I love about these tools is you can use them with your left hand or your right hand. When you purchase the tools, they'll actually have the blade usually on the other side. It was on this side, but I actually just unscrewed it here and flipped it over to be on the opposite side, because I think by default, maybe Fiskars can answer that for me, but I think everything is right-handed. But these tools and the rotary cutters, I flip them all to make them left-handed, which is a really nice thing when you're left-handed. If there's any other lefties out there who want to use the rotary cutter, you can totally use one, and it's super easy. You unscrew right there. Then before we get started, we got our thread. Rotary cutter, when you are using a rotary cutter, you do want to use a cutting mat. And I am using this Fiskars 24 by 36 mat. I love because it's so big. But one thing that's really fun, I can show you at the end of the class, is it folds up and is super compact. So you can store it away if you're sewing on the dining room table, which I often do, or need to pack up your stuff if you're using another table. So that's really fun. An acrylic ruler. Again, this one is fun because from Fiskars is because it folds up. So you can just pack up all your sewing stuff, put it in a cabinet, a box, and store it away. So we're going to use one of these. And then you need, obviously, your sewing machine. All your sewing machine has to do is a straight stitch to complete this project. So you don't need any fancy stitches, zigzag stitches, or anything, just a straight stitch. You also need pins or I'm using Wonder Clips, which are also available at Michaels and at michaels.com. These are just little tiny clips. They almost look like little chip clips that are used for sewing projects. I think a lot of people use them for putting like the edging or the binding on quilts, but I've been using them a lot and I love using them. The only thing to be mindful of is that they are plastic, so they cannot touch your iron because they would melt. If you do have pins, my preferred pin is a glass head pin, simply because you can iron directly on top of it and you don't have to worry about it melting. And I do know Michaels has those at michaels.com. So we're gonna go over and start cutting our fabric. And I'll share, I think we'll share this in the chat now, but I have this little chart that I created that tells you what size to cut your fabric for small bags, medium bags, and large bags. The largest bag we're going to be making is roughly 6 by 6 by 7, but you can totally make a larger bag for this project. You'll just want to look at this little chart and roughly, and you can follow it. And if you want to go larger or even smaller than the smallest one, you just want to note that if you add 2 inches, or excuse me, yeah, if you add 2 inches to the size of your fabric square that you start out with, it's going to make roughly a 1 inch bigger finished project. So you just want to kind of be mindful of that. So if you wanted to go up, and I'm using 1/2 inch that I'll show you guys why I did that in just a second, but you could just round to 13 and then go up to 15 if you want to make it easier. If you're using fabric remnants you have from another project, that's totally fine too. This is a great way to use up small pieces of fabric. So maybe you pick up some fabric at Michaels that you like, and then you use one that you already had a small piece of fabric scrap to use up for this project. So for this one today, we're gonna go ahead and make the medium one. But the reason I made this small, the 8.5 by 8.5, was because you can get exactly 4 pieces from this one small piece of fabric, or the 1/4 of the yard. So I wanted to maximize my fabric and minimize the waste that we have from project. Which is something I've been trying to be more mindful of when I'm sewing. So you can totally kind of adjust it. So if your fabric is a little bit smaller, go to 8 by 8 if you want to make the small one. So it doesn't have to be exact. And that's something that I'll probably say 1,000 times today as we're working. But again, it's so true. This project is so forgiving and you can really mess it up and it's still going to be functional. It's still going to be okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. So we're going to get started with our rotary cutter, and I'm going to move some things out of the way. And I kind of usually like to stand when I'm cutting the fabric because I think it's easier to put pressure on the ruler and kind of eye it out. So I'm going to do my best and try to stay seated for this. But I'm going to grab this. Now, anytime you're sewing, I like to pre-wash my fabric and dry it the way I intend to wash and dry the finished project. And so if that's clothes, I like to wash it on cold and tumble dry it on low. But these bins probably aren't going to get washed. So this is a step you can totally skip. I went on and washed all my fabric because, again, I always do it. It's kind of like an automatic thing. And because I have a toddler and she's probably going to get food all over anything I make, and I will have to wash these in the washing machine, but it's not a step you have to do. But you do want to make sure that you grabbed your iron and press out any wrinkles, especially if you did wash these. Cotton fabric can get really wrinkly in the dryer. So you want to make sure it's nice and smooth before you cut. If you don't do that before you use the rotary cutter, it will make things pretty wrinkly. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to use my awesome folding ruler, and then I'm going to use this rotary cutter. And one good kind of best practice with rotary cutter is as soon as you pop the blade out and make a cut, get in the habit of retracting the blade. I have had only one accident where I did accidentally cut my finger, but it was totally my fault because I had left the blade out. So that is something that I've never done since, because I've always, as soon as I cut, I pop the blade back in. And the same thing with this one as well. You just want to pop it out, and then as soon as you make a cut, get in the habit of doing that to just keep yourself safe. So I'm going to take my fabric and line it up on the grid. And if you like, you can start on the 1 and the 1, so then you don't have to measure or do any math, but you can totally use any part of the grid. But we're just going to, for this one, I'm going to cut a 10.5 inch square by 10.5. And I'll show you guys some little tips when you're using a rotary cutter. And if you guys have been, some of you have been sewing for a long time, you will be able to make probably 3 or 4 of these in the time we make one, because they just sew up so quickly. So if you're more advanced, you can fly right through this project. I'm going to use my ruler, and you'll see that some of Michael's cuts have the selvage, which is just where the fabric is woven together at the end. Typically, if I was sewing clothes or something like that, I would not, I would cut that part off. But because we're going to have a seam allowance that's about 1/2 inch, this, you really don't even see it. I'm going to just go with it and use up every bit of that fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and take my ruler, and measure it out. This is how it might look a little different if you're right-handed, but I like to have my blade on the left-hand side. So I'm going to measure 10.5 and use my ruler to line it up. And on the cutting mat is so helpful because I can just look right in the middle where those little dots are and cut it. And then you want to take your opposite hand that's not holding the rotary cutter and use it to hold down the acrylic ruler. And you want to use kind of a lot of pressure to hold it down firmly in place. And then you're just going to let the blade glide over or glide next to the acrylic ruler. And you'll see how I'm moving my hand up as I cut. That's just simply to keep this from wiggling around. So now I'm going to take this one and do the same thing. And I just like to double check it, kind of get the habit. This square in the middle is 12 by 12. So that's an easy way to just fly through this project and not have to measure out anything. But I'm just going to double check here. And if anyone has any questions while I'm doing this, feel free to ask in the chat and I will do my best to answer them. But I'm just going to use my opposite hand here.
Hey, Sarah, we do have a question quickly. Any suggestions or recommendations from anyone who is using a pattern that orients vertically?
Yes. So if you have, so I'm using for my examples, patterns that are non-directional, so they can be sewn either any way and it totally works. But if you're using one, I think I had one behind me that was like hearts that all went in one direction. Totally, when you're cutting these, and I won't get too technical into this, but woven fabric has a certain grain. So it's vertical threads and horizontal threads. You want to make sure when you're cutting that you're cutting on the grain, meaning that your fabric is laid out so the vertical lines are going vertically the same way like my cutting mat is, and the horizontal ones are going horizontally. If you're using a fabric like as a pattern that definitely has a distinct top and bottom of the design, then you want to just cut it out. You want both pieces to be going in the same direction, and then when you sew it, you're going to have the design upside down. And what I mean by that is if the, and I'm sorry I don't have an example of this, but if you had like little hearts going this way, you would actually have the lining look upside down when you look in the bag. So that way, when you fold over that lining edge, you would see the design going the right way. And I can show you guys with a scrap piece of fabric when we're done about that. But the biggest thing is you want to make sure when you're cutting the fabric that it's on the grain or lined up horizontally and vertically when you're cutting. If you cut it like this, or I lined it up and then cut like this, woven fabric that's cut at this angle stretches. And then when you sew, it might get a little wonky or wobbly because it's actually stretching while you sew. But if I have it going this way, you'll notice that it doesn't really stretch. So that's like a very, very general and quick overview of that. But you do want to be mindful when you're cutting out your fabric that it is lined up like that. So I'm going to go ahead and take my other piece and cut it out. And then one little tip that I have is when you're cutting close to an edge, rather than, let's see, trying to cut like this where you have a lot of slack or extra fabric on the side that your cutting hand is on, I like to move the ruler so my ruler is holding down the larger piece of fabric and cut on that side. So in this case, if I'm left-handed, I'll either get up around, walk around the table, or move my project all the way around so that my ruler is holding down the fabric, because the ruler is 6 inches wide. So it's really helpful for keeping your fabric in place. So this one in particular, I think is 11 inches. So we only have to cut a 1/2 inch off. So this is a great example of that. I'm going to move this around and just trim 1/2 inch over here. And use my ruler to hold it down. And if you didn't want to measure, you could totally just stack your fabric on top of each other for this project. Again, it doesn't have to be super exact. You just want to have 2 squares that are the same size. And in this case, I'm doing 10.5 by 10.5. So I'll hold down my ruler with my hand as it glides up, and you can cut down, you can cut up, totally personal preference. So I'm gonna take my scrap, move that over there, and then rotate it around and have 10.5. So I could even just stack this on top of here if I wanted, or you can use your ruler, whichever you prefer. And let's see. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut. And this is where I think it is a lot easier to do when you're standing. Okay. And then these little pieces you could use to make little teeny tiny bags, or even piece them together, sew them down, and then you'll have a square with the remnants. So you can really use up every piece of fabric to make these little bags, which is great. So I have cotton or let me see over here. I have my fabric already lined. We'll use the cotton canvas for the other side. And then we also need to cut out interfacing. So the interfacing is a little wrinkly, and that is something that you won't press or iron before you sew because it has the adhesive on the side. You just want to kind of do your best to smooth it out with your ruler, and you're going to cut this the exact same size as your fabric. So if you're making the medium size, that's 10.5 by 10.5 inch square. So we're going to cut that out exactly the same way, placing your rotary cutter on top. And you would just roll it out and cut it out. And I already cut these pieces out for us to get started on that. So I'll have those squares, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut this quickly. For this one, you can also double up the fabric. The rotary cutters, the blade is so sharp that it will easily cut through the cotton canvas. And we just want to be mindful of cutting it on the grain or straight, keeping those vertical and horizontal threads even. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that edge off here where it frayed, because I did wash this, so it frayed a little bit. And then I'm going to cut out my 2 squares real quick. And while I'm doing this, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask away.
Hey, Sarah, it would be helpful for some people looking to how to approach kind of their fat quarter in general as a piece of fabric and how to make those initial cuts. So I don't know if you have a fat quarter available that you can kind of just show if they're making, let's say, a medium size bin, how they should cut the fabric.
Yeah, so this is a quarter of fat, what's considered a fat quarter, a cut quarter of a yard, which is what is widely available at Michael's stores now, and a lot of fun prints. So this one, if you cut it in 4, you'd be able to make one entire bag, one entire small bag, or 8.5 by 8.5, or you can cut it a little bit larger and get one, either the lining fabric or the outer fabric for it. Since it's wider here, I like to take the wide side and cut the 10.5 that way, and then kind of right in the middle, you'll be able to get 2 squares, and then you'll have a little scrap. So you will need 2 fat quarters if you're making a medium or large bag, or extra large or even larger. But you can definitely cut it exactly into 4 pieces and make one entire small bag, which the small bag is what I have this little 4-inch planter and pot in. So you can get one entire small bag out of 1 fat quarter, or you will need to make a larger piece. The cotton canvas at Michael's comes in larger pieces, so that's why this one looks a lot larger than the other ones. So I think they come in 2 or 3 yard sections. So I'm going to use that just to kind of show you guys the difference of the fabric. So I'm going to measure this real quick and then cut it out. And then the next step is you want to go ahead and plug in your iron without steam on a medium setting, because we're going to add the interfacing to the thinner or the quilting cotton, the thinner cotton fabric that you have for this project. So if you guys want to go ahead and make sure your iron is hot, we're going to use that next. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut this out real quick. And then these will sew up so quickly, which is what I love about this project. So I'm just gonna quickly line that up. And then use my ruler. And here's, once you have one cut, you don't even have to use the grid to line it up. You can just do that. Okay, oops, and I didn't press hard enough. So I have like one tiny little thread. So just wanna be careful when you're doing that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on sewing these. So I'm going to use that yellow gingham, and I got my interfacing cut to size. The interfacing, I can't remember, it comes in maybe about 20 inches wide. So sometimes you have like these little tiny strips at the end. You can piece together scraps for this project on the interfacing, and it will work totally just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and slide my ironing board over here so y'all can see that. And here's my scraps. I'll show you that as well. So I'm just going to take the printed or the design side of the fabric and put it down. And then I'm going to take, you want to feel the interfacing, and whatever side has the little dots or texture, you want to have that touching your fabric or have that side down. And you're going to line it up. And the interfacing packaging actually has specific instructions on how to do this if you've never done this before. But the biggest tip I have is you don't want to use steam. And you also just want to make sure those little dots are facing down, because that's the glue. And if you put your hot iron on top of it, it is actually going to melt and kind of get adhesive all over your iron. So you're just going to hold your iron over here for about 10 seconds in place. And you want to just like lift it up and then put it down right next to where you ironed. And my iron, I think, cooled off a little bit since I hadn't used it. I'm just going to let it heat up. That's why it's blinking at me. But you just want to have the adhesive side down and press it on. And the heat is going to fuse the fabric or the interfacing to the fabric. And the reason why we're using this is the fabric is really thin, and we want to give it a little bit of thickness or weight to make it a little stiffer, so that way the bag stands up. On Michaels.com, the interfacing is available in a lot of different thicknesses, including one that's really stiff and rigid. If you were making a larger bag, larger than the large size that I have, which is 12.5 by 12.5, I would definitely use a thicker interfacing, just so that the bag is a little sturdy and doesn't kind of flop around when it's empty. So I'm just going to grab this side and press this side. If you're using a printed or quilting cotton or a thinner cotton for both the lining and the outside of your fabric bin, you want to add interfacing to all 4 pieces. So you'll see that already now I can tell, you see how it's like not as floppy, it's a little more rigid, but that one is ready to go. So we're going to do the same thing over here. I have my Fusible with a dot side down, going to line it up and press. And I'm just letting it sit for about 5 to 10 seconds so it can heat up on there, and then lifting up the iron and moving on so that the whole area is covered, and it works pretty quickly.
Sarah, we do have a question regarding different weights of canvas fabric. Have you tried any different weights of canvas fabric, and do you recommend any specifically?
Yes, the heavier the better for this project, because again, the heavier fabric tends to be a little more rigid and stiff. I think the one at Michael's is pretty lightweight. It's probably only about 4 or 5 ounces. might be a little lighter. I'm not sure if it says it on the label. But the heavier fabrics, like if you sew a lot and maybe you are made upholstery, you have upholstery weight fabric, or if you have something a little bit heavier, maybe even if you've made jeans or twill pants, corduroy, something like that, would work great for this project just because it has more weight. If you're using a cotton canvas that's a little bit heavier for both the inside and outside, totally skip the interfacing. You don't need it. The only reason I'm using it is because I'm using quilting cottons and they're a little bit thinner. So you'll notice here, I just used a little piece of scrap of the Fusible interfacing, and it will layer on top of itself. And it's a great way to use up those scraps. So when you are cutting with the rotary cutter, if you don't have quite enough, you can totally piece it together. You're never gonna know and never gonna see it, but don't throw away those little scraps because they come into good use. So I'm gonna slide this over here and we're gonna go ahead and we got our outer fabric, our lining fabric. We're gonna take our fabrics and put them right sides together, put the printed sides all the way together. And it looks like I maybe didn't cut this one super straight, which is okay. We're gonna put them right sides together. I'm gonna trim that. Looks like I was the 1/4 inch off just now. You're gonna put them right sides together, both the lining and the outer fabrics. The canvas looks exactly the same on both sides, so don't sweat trying to figure out what is the right side and the wrong side, because it looks great on both sides. So I'm just gonna my rotary cutter and trim. Just trim this little piece off, just so it's square. So the main part, the kind of the hardest part about sewing these bags, is to create the bottom of the bag, the square bottom. And there's a couple different ways you can do this. The way I'm going to show you guys today requires a little bit of cutting, but I think it makes sewing the bag so much easier. So I have my little handy chart, which we put in the chat as well. And for a 10.5 inch piece of fabric like I have here, you're going to cut the corners of the bottom pieces 2.5 inch squares. So I'm going to show you guys what that means and what that looks like. So I'm just going to use my bag here. You can use the rotary cutter to do this. You can use scissors to do this as well. This part does not have to be super exact. You're just going to measure about 2.5, and I'm just going to show you 2 different ways to do this real quick. But the idea is, and I'll see if you guys can see that, I'm going to cut a little square out of the bottom of each side. And this is going to help us make the bottom of the bag and help it stand up. So I'm just going to do this. You can also use your rotary cutter to do this as well. Move this over here. There's a couple different ways, and I'm going to do it this way. And or you can just use scissors. So I'll show you both ways. And if you cut a little bit more, that is totally fine. It does not have to be perfect for this step. So when you get to the edge, you just want to push the rotary cutter in there. I'm going to trim this, so you'll see it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm actually not even going to measure the other side. Just place my rotary cutter in and cut the square out, or you can use your scissors for this part. And these are snips that I absolutely love. They're the Fiskars razor edge snips that are also available at Michael's, and they're crazy sharp and cut fabric so well. But I also love keeping them by my sewing machine and use them as thread snips because they're tiny. You can get right in there. But you'll see I have my lining piece with the 2 squares taken out, and I'm going to do the exact same thing to the bottom of my bag. And this is where, if you're using that directional fabric, you want to have your lining in directional fabric in the lining, meaning you want to have the fabric right sides together upside down. So that way, when you sew up the bag and fold the edge over, your design would be going in the right direction. So I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing and show you all. I'm just using a fabric pencil that washes away, but you could totally just use a pen or marker for this because you are not going to see these markings when we sew up the bag. So I could use my ruler for this I just love projects like this that you don't have to be super exact. Even though I love sewing things that are super meticulous like clothing, sometimes it's nice to just make something quickly and you don't have to be so perfect with it. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these ones out with the rotary cutter real quick. If you were making the larger bag, you would just go up 1/2 inch and do a 3x3 square. If you're making a small bag, you would do a 2x2. And if you wanted to make a much larger bag, the same thing applies. Just go up about 1/2 inch for each one if you wanted to make an extra large bag. And if you have any questions at the end of the chat or at the end of the class, feel free to send me a message on Instagram and I'd be more than happy to help you figure out if you want to make a specific size bag when you're all done. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my ruler and cut out these corners, and then we're going to go ahead and start sewing. And this part is so fun and it goes so quickly. I think if you want to go ahead and do we want to do a giveaway now? Well, before we start sewing?
Yes, that would be perfect.
Okay, great.
So this is Holly here over at Fiskars. And if you've been actively participating in the chat, we've just been randomly choosing some winners. So we do have right now 10 winners at random that will receive about $100 worth of Fiskars product. So we'll still give away about 8 more boxes in the second half. So just keep the comments coming in the public chat. We love to see the engagement and we're just picking at random. So I will private message you if you've become a winner, but I will list off our top 10. And if you have not sent me a message and I call out your name, please make sure you send me a private message with your email address and your shipping address, and we'll connect after the class. So the first one I have on here is just Linda. Then it looks like Devonia Desia, Kelly, I can't say your last name, Kriziak, Hannah Mutter, Nina Holton, Carol Diane, Josie Nola, Cindy, Lisa Thornburg, and Deb Hansen. So those are our top winners for the first half of the class. I will re-announce those at the second half with an additional 8, but just shoot me a message if you have not yet, and I will be able to get you connected after class. So keep the comments coming, and we will announce our winners at the end.
Awesome, thank you so much. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get our sewing machine. I've got all-purpose thread that I purchased at Michael's in here. Again, you can use the same color if you really want to be meticulous and want to hide every seam, match your thread to your project. I'm going to use navy blue just so you guys can see the stitches well, but you can use whatever thread is already in your machine. It's going to work out just fine. Before we start sewing, you want to make sure your machine is set up to do a straight stitch, and then you want to have a seam allowance, and that's just simply means how far the needle is positioned from the edge of your fabric, about 5/8 or 15 millimeters. And one little tip that I love to do, and I'm not sure if you can see that super well, is I like to take a piece of washi tape, tear it off, and use it as a little guide when I'm sewing, so then I don't even have to think about seam allowances when I'm sewing. Kind of makes it sewing foolproof. It's a great beginner tip, but I know advanced sewists that do it as well. So I'm just using some clips. The smaller the bag, you could probably get away. I think I sewed a bunch of these without pinning or clipping. It's not necessary, but it does help your fabric, especially if it's maybe a little slippery, keeps it in place. So I'm just going to start sewing. And you do want to go back and forth and kind of lock down your stitches. So you're going to go sew a few stitches and then reverse it and go back just to keep the threads in place. It's actually not necessary to do that for this project because we are going to finish all the seams, or all the edges are going to be sewn again. But for this project, I do like it just because we are going to flip the fabric inside out and put a little bit of stress on the bag when we're flipping it out to complete the project. So I do think it helps keep those threads in place and gives it a little more strength. So we're just going to sew the bag and sew straight lines on the outside of the fabric all the way across. So we're going to go all the way down, turn it around, and do 3 sides: the left side, the right side, and the bottom of the bag. of the outside of the fabric, the outer fabric. So I'm just gonna quickly sew this when I get to the edge over here. I'm gonna go backwards just a little bit. And then when I'm done, and this is where I love those Fiskars snips, which I moved over here. And I'm gonna trim my project and trim those thread tails. And now you guys can see the overhead shot that I have sewn one side. Now I'm gonna sew the bottom all the way across and the right side. And if your seam allowance is set to 1/4 inch, or if you're using a foot that's a 1/4 inch or a little bit larger, a little bit smaller, it's totally fine. The only thing it means is that your bag might be a little bit larger, a little bit smaller than the ones I'm making, and that's totally okay. So I'm gonna go backwards, forwards, and then I'm gonna sew all the way across here real quick.
Hey, Sarah, we've got a couple people that are wondering about washi tape and what washi tape is, if you'd be able to explain a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So washi tape is Japanese paper tape that is really similar to masking tape in that it's not super sticky and it's easily removable. And let me see, I think I have a roll. It's available at Michael's. And I love it for a zillion DIY projects, but I keep one actually in my sewing machine at all times. And you can see it here, and I'll show you in the overhead. And I just like to tear off a little piece of tape, and I will more than happy to show this on Instagram later today. But I put it on my sewing machine, directly on my sewing machine, and use it as a guide. So that way, while I'm sewing, I'll put another one on top to make it a little brighter. I like to line up the edge of my fabric with the left edge of the washi tape, and that just makes it for a really big guide. Every sewing machine is a little bit different, and some of them have really great visual guides to help you line up the fabric. I know I've seen some that even have like a big grid or just clear lines. Mine, the lines are very subtle and kind of hard to see. So I like to put a piece of tape all the way across just so I can help me line up my fabric. And it's a really great tip because if you're new to sewing, sometimes the hardest part is keeping the line straight, and it can be a little intimidating. So the tape helps you just have a visual indicator of where to position the fabric and kind of how to keep it steady as you're sewing. So the last step here is I'm sewing all the way down on the opposite side of the bag, and we're gonna leave the opening up. So go backwards, forwards, and then we're gonna do the same exact thing to the lining fabric, except we need to leave a little opening on the side because we're gonna have to turn the bag right side out. So I'll use my snips here and trim those threads. So you'll see I have one done here. I'm gonna do the exact same thing, pin it or clip it. I'll probably only put one. The bag, the side that has the interfacing is nice and sturdy, so it doesn't need a ton of clips. But you do want to use a marker, pen, pencil, chalk, whatever marking tool you have. And you want to mark roughly a 2 to 3 inch opening, because we're going to sew above those lines and below those lines, but leave that opening open so that way we can turn the bag right side out. I have sewn a ton of these kind of mindlessly and just kind of got in the zone and made a bunch of them and realized I didn't leave that opening open. So I had to get my seam ripper in there and open that. If you do that, it's totally fixable. You just want to make sure you have a little bit of an opening to turn the fabric right side out. So now I'm going to go ahead and I can even show you guys. I'll sew this side, the bottom, and then either the left or right side, doesn't matter, but you just want to make sure you have an opening on the lining fabric. So I'm going to do the exact same thing and quickly sew over here. And then what's great is once you sew this, you literally just have to do the corners and the back and you'll be done in about 5 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this all the way down. I'm going to go back, do a few backwards stitches at the end and trim my threads. And I know some people like to trim their threads at the very end of the project. You can totally do that as well. I always like to do it as I go. So So I'm gonna go ahead and sew the bottom now. Oops, and look, I moved it over. I wasn't using my guide, but that's okay. And you'll see I didn't pin it. I'm just using my fingers to hold the end over here. It's totally okay. It doesn't have to be super exact. Go backwards, go forward, lift it, and then I'll trim these threads. And then we're gonna sew the last side, but remember we're gonna leave that opening on the sides. We're gonna sew below those lines and above those lines. And then if you guys have already done this, some of you might be quick, you're gonna go ahead and we're gonna sew the corners. It's the next step. And then the very last step will be putting the bag together and just sewing all along the top. And I will have step-by-step instructions with photos on my blog, sarahartz.com, on Monday. So you'll have a great guide for that if you have any questions or maybe want to go back to the class. And the class also will be recorded and available at michaels.com on Tuesday if you want to go back and watch any of these things. And I am available for questions.
Sarah, we do have a question asking about machine tension and also needle size.
That's a great question. So I am using, let's see, I'm using an 80 needle, which is kind of like I'd say medium size needle. And the tension on my machine is automatically set based on the fabric. Like I told I was using medium weight cotton fabric. But if yours isn't all fancy like that, it's totally fine. You might want to take one of your scrap corner pieces and do a little bit of a test sewing, because anytime you sew any fabric, you want to do a test run of your stitches, make sure the tension is okay. But whatever the stitch length I'm using is 2.5, which is kind of the default straight stitch length that I always use when I'm sewing seams. And then my tension is automatically set. So the tension varies on every single machine. I'm using a Husqvarna Viking machine. So mine is setting the tension for me, but I would recommend like those corner pieces that we cut out. Those are great little fabric scraps to use to test your stitches, but I am using a size 80 needle for this. But if you were using a heavier fabric, like if you're using a thick cotton canvas or cotton duck for both the inside and outside, you would want to use a thicker needle that's meant for heavier fabric, because it's so important. Especially if you're just starting out, it can be really overwhelming and you're like, what, I have to like think about needle size? Like I didn't even know that was a thing, which when I started out, I think I sewed probably for a couple of years before I realized and learned about needle sizes. But it does make a huge difference if you are finding that your thread is breaking a lot, or even if your needle breaks or the stitches look a little wonky. That's probably because you're using the wrong, one of the reasons it could be is that you're using the wrong needle size. So that is something you want to be mindful of. But I think an 80 is a good place to start for this project. So I know we're running a little short on time, so I'm going to go ahead and show you all. The next step is going to be to square the corners. And I'm going to put your hand in the bag, the outer lining doesn't matter, and you're going to pinch the corner together and line up those side seams. See if you guys can see that. And if you want to be super meticulous, you want to just line up those inside seams. But this is how we create that square corner of the bag. You can take your iron and press these seams open, but because they have the interfacing, I've found that I can just do that with my fingers and skip the pressing, and it comes out just fine. I like to just put a pin or a clip right there to hold it in place on both sides. And then we're going to use the same seam allowance, 15 millimeters, to sew all the way across. And you're going to repeat that step 4 times to sew the corner of the bag. And this is what's going to make the bag stand up. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that here. And sew all the way across. And for time, I'm just going to go straight across and not backstitch, but I would recommend it because it's going to keep the bags a little sturdier. And you're just going to go all the way across, sewing from side to side. And this part does not have to be perfect because it's the bottom of the bag. You'll see real quick, and I'm going to just use the cutter right there. And I got one side. You're going to repeat this with the other side, and then also do it with the outer fabrics. Push the seams open with your fingers. And there we go. Line up the seams and then put a pin or clip in place and sew all the way across. When you are sewing, you do want to remove the clips or pins before your needle gets to that area. You don't want to be sewing over the pins, or definitely not over the clips. But it does help keep your fabric. So you'll notice I'm sewing, and then when I get close, I'll take the clip out and keep sewing all the way across. And if we're okay on time, we might be running a little bit late as we finish this project. But if you do need to go right at 3, you are welcome to watch the video later, or again, there'll be step-by-step directions on my blog. So if your fabric's a little softer like this canvas, the part that doesn't have the interfacing, it's helpful to stick your hand in the bag to line up those seams. And I'm just going to go ahead and stitch that closed. And then there's only one more step, 2 more steps after this. Sewing the top and then sewing that lining closed. So these bags, once you make one of them and kind of get the process down, they sew up so fast. So you could actually batch this project and cut a ton of fabric one evening and then sew up a bunch of linings one day and kind of multitask. And I think these bags would make such great gifts. You can use them as gift baskets. I thought they would be really cute for a new mom or for baby shower to fill up with goodies. And I think they would be great for cookies for the holidays. Okay. All right, so I'm going to use my snips and trim that real quick. And then one more side.
Sarah, as you're sewing that next side, we've had a couple questions asking about some creative ideas on what you can do with the fabric scraps from cutting out these bins. Do you have any suggestions?
The little squares are great for piecing together, and you can actually do like the half square triangle, which if you just Google that or look on YouTube, there's so many tutorials for that to actually make a to quilt them together, is a great use for that, those pieces. Though if you have like longer strips, they could be pieced together and then you can use them to make the same project, to make them to make bags. When I have like scraps like this, I keep these all, like I have a bin under the table that I just put all my kind of weird scraps that I know I can't use. And I use them to fill up a big leather poof that we have in the living room, and they make great stuffing. So don't throw away your scraps. There's so many uses, and I'd be more than happy to share even more fabric scrap ideas on my Instagram this weekend as well. But you can definitely keep the scraps and don't throw them away. I know a lot of people, if they have longer strips too, a lot of people are making scrunchies and headbands now, which is super fun. Even long scraps like this, Michael sells headbands, and you can wrap them around like that, like make wrapper headbands. I've even on my blog, you can use fabric strips like that for using Mod Podge and wrapping a wood bangle bracelet and making a really fun like statement bracelet. So there are lots of sewing and non-sewing projects that you can do with those fabric scraps. So the second to last step, we're going to take our outer fabric and place it inside. Oops, one step, got ahead of myself. You want to make sure that the fabric lining and the outer fabrics are right sides together. So that means you're going to have to flip one of them so that the finished or good side is out. It doesn't matter if you put the lining in the outer fabric or the outer fabric in the lining for this step. But it does matter that you have the right sides or the outsides, the good sides, facing each other. So I like to use the one that doesn't have the interfacing and put it in just because it's a little bit softer. So I find it easier to do it this way. but you can totally do it the other way as well. And then you're going to just line up the side seams. And again, you could use your iron to press this, but I'm just going to use my fingers to push the seams open. And then I'm going to line them up and place a pin, or I'm going to use a Wonder Clip, but you could use a pin as well. That's what you have. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, and then I'll put 2 more pins. And then we're just going to simply sew all the way around. Don't need to leave an opening because we left an opening on the side of the bag. So line up my side seams there. And then, and this is where that seam allowance, that the distance that you're sewing from the edge is super important, because it means, and cutting the fabric squares the same size means that your bags are going to fit perfectly inside of each other. So I'm going to have that. If your sewing machine, I'm all ready to sew now. If your sewing machine has a free arm, which just means, and I'm going to show you guys on this picture, mine has like this little removable case, but just means I can easily sew like a sleeve or a loop or something. So I'm going to slide that to make it easier to put my bag on here and sew all the way around. If yours doesn't, it's totally okay. I've sewn them with that little piece in place as well. You just might have to like sew a couple inches and reposition the fabric as you go. But we're just going to go ahead and sew all the way around here. It doesn't matter where you're
sewing. We have one other question I just want to squeeze in.
Sure.
We've had a question about the interfacing and the thickness or the weight of the interfacing that you're using. Does that matter, or do you have a recommendation?
I'm using medium weight, which is what's available at local, in Michael's stores. They do have thicker ones available online as well, but I chose to use the medium ones since it's super readily available. And I found that it works really well for these bags, and even the ones that I've used quilting cotton on both sides, like I did for that little planter there. If you're making a bag that's larger than the large size that I'm doing, which is starting with the 12.5 by 12.5 inch square fabric, if you're going any bigger, I would recommend ordering the thicker interfacing, which I think is considered either thick or heavyweight on the Michael's website. And that is just gonna give it more bulk. Another option, which I was thinking about as I was making these, is if you wanted to have it stand up and you knew you weren't gonna wash the bags, you could actually insert a thin piece of like cardstock, like if you had like a scrap piece of white cardstock or chipboard or something in the bag, and that would make it more rigid. I have like storage bins behind me, and I realized that I purchased, and I realized even though they were different material, that they had some like sort of structure with just cardstock in them that helped them stand upright. So I was like, oh, you could totally insert that in the bag before you sew all the way around. So that's another option as well. If you don't want to purchase interfacing, or maybe have some scraps if you're a crafter or a scrapbooker. So I'm just going to go ahead and trim these. And then the last step, we have to like sew the lining closed and turn it out. So you have that hole open on the side. So you're going to take your fabric and pull the inside one, or in this case, it's the outer fabric, but pull it out so that the fabric is right side out. And this is why I like to leave like a 2 to 3 inch opening, because if it's any smaller, it can be a little bit difficult to do this. So just going to carefully work the fabric out of here. Sometimes I like to use a pencil. I actually keep a chopstick in my sewing kit. I find like a pretty big one. I find it really helpful for little things like this too. There are tools that are specific for this, but I like to use what I have around the house for stuff like this. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull it through. And then the very last step is going to be sewing that hole in the lining fabric closed. And if you really wanted these bags to be totally reversible, which they absolutely could be, I would then match my thread color to my fabric, and you could really either hand sew it, but I like to do everything as much as possible on the machine. So I'm going to go ahead and just edge stitch, or just stitch very close to the edge my opening closed. And I'm not going to switch thread, obviously, because of time. But if you did want the bags to look reversible and you can flip them out, then I would definitely match those threads. So I'm just going to go here and sew this closed. And I'm just sewing really close to the edge. And then I'm going to want to use my snips to trim the tails on that fabric. And then the very last step to finish your bag is going to be I like to get a hot iron with steam and press the edges down so it looks nice and neat. And I'm gonna sew that, push this in here, and we'll slide the ironing board over here. Make sure steam is on. And then you can see over here, if you don't want your bag to be reversible, what I like to do, and you're pressing it, I like to slightly roll the line or the outer fabric down a little bit. So that way, when I fold the edge over, I'm not going to see any of the outer fabric along the edge of the bag. Totally something you could skip, not necessary at all. But I think a good press at the very end is essential for finishing up your project, getting out any wrinkles, especially if you have maybe some wrinkles at the bottom. You could, if you wanted to do a top stitch or just sew one line of stitches all the way around once you've pressed it. That will just kind of help hold the lining in place, but it's not necessary. And for all these examples, I skipped that step. So I'm just gonna take a hot iron with some steam and press it down. And slide it all the way around, and that's just going to give a nice crisp edge to my bag. And then we are totally done with the project. So what I love about this project is it's super simple, it's beginner friendly, but it can absolutely be customized using whatever fabric you have on hand, whatever fabric you prefer to match. If you're using them to store toys, maybe you want them to match your room. And for some of the examples, I took some white craft paint that I got at Michael's and a round foam brush and stamped the fabric after I cut it, but before I started sewing, and made my own printed fabric with the same exact cotton canvas that I got at Michael's. So I also used my woven labels that are available in my shop and sewed them right into the seam to add a cute little detail there. So you'll see that here. I have one over here as well. It just makes a little fun personalization for them. If you're a quilter, you may want to add some quilting stitches, piece it together. You can really customize this. So then the last step is just to fold it down, whatever height you want, and your bag is totally done. So do we have any questions before we wrap up or have the last giveaway?
Any questions on your end, Allie? Otherwise, I can jump to giveaway.
There was one last question. I saw a couple people ask if you could do like a really simple overview of just how the bag comes together when you fit the two pieces inside of each other. And then when you turn it right side out, I think it was just a quick, if you have a way to quickly do an overview. I know we're at time, but a couple people were interested in seeing that one more time.
I don't think I have one in that process right now sewn, but I will have, I have really great photos that I'm sharing on my blog on Monday that have that process laid out, the thing step by step. So just head over to sarahhartz.com on Monday and you can see a little bit more detail about that. But one thing I will show is once I flipped it out, before I stuffed the lining back into the bag, I like to, and I can do that right here, actually. I chose to sew up the opening and sew that side closed before I pushed the bag in. So once you flip it out, it's going to look something like this, like a big tube almost, or pillowcase. And then that's when you're going to want to work the lining in there. So I can kind of show you this step right now. And you just kind of have to work it around and get it lined up. And then you can choose once you've done it, how far you want to fold the bag over. If you're putting a tall plant in it or something, you may want to only fold it over an inch. It's really whatever you prefer for that. But again, I will have those photos on my blog on Monday.
Great, awesome, thanks so much.
And then I'm gonna jump in with giveaway quick, as I know where we're at time. So if people need to hop off, they can. First off, I want to thank everyone for the participation. We've been feverishly answering questions over here and trying to keep up with gathering information for the giveaways. So if you heard your name announced as a winner originally, please send a message to Holly/Fiskars or any of the other Fiskars girls, Allie or Kelsey, you see, and they can help get your address. I just don't want to make sure we miss anyone. But the remaining winners for the second half of the class are Grace Thomas, Eulara O'Hara, Debbie Valero, Rosalind Haywood, Tammy Silvara, and Tamika. I also did catch the first winner I chose was Linda, and there's 4 Lindas in the class. So all Lindas win today, apparently, because we're going to make it fair. So if your name was announced, please just shoot me a message, and I will continue to try to message everyone, but I don't think I've captured everyone's addresses. So I want to make sure those winners get their Fiskars product.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. Again, you can follow me at Sarah Hartz on Instagram, on Pinterest, or on everything else. And you can also find Fiskars at Fiskars Americas on Instagram for tons of product inspiration. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me a message. And I had so much fun creating with you. So thank you so much for joining me today.